Isaiah, the great prophet, as a young man, had an extraordinary experience. He sees God enthroned above Jerusalem, surrounded by the angels in all of his glory, and his first thought is, I'm going to die of embarrassment, because he understood how sinful, deceitful he was. And the Lord said, who will proclaim my truth? And Isaiah was thinking, certainly he can't be talking about me or the likes of me, because everybody I know is a liar, and everybody I know is deceitful, and everybody I know is petty, and everybody I know is selfish. But there's a fire around the throne of God, and an angel takes a glowing, burning coal and flies towards Isaiah and touches his lips with this burning coal, not to kill or destroy him, as Isaiah thought, but to purify him. He felt the power of God go through him. And so then when the Lord said, whom will I send? Isaiah steps forward and says, send me. And we have so many passages from his writing that inspire us. Now today he talks about there being a great veil that covers all the peoples of the world. And everybody is wondering, what's on the other side of that veil? What's on the other side of the curtain? And Isaiah promised one day that veil would be lifted, so people of every race, every nationality, every economic group could see the very face of God. And in his writings, he would talk about a time when the lion and the lamb would lay down with one another, a time when all the peoples of the earth would be able to live in harmony, and there would be no more war, because they would have seen what's behind the veil. Now, in our spiritual life, all of us wonder, gee, what is God like? What's my life all about? And it doesn't mean you have to be a philosopher or a poet or a mystic to ask that question. It's in the heart of every human being. And it seems that very young children are able to see beyond the veil more readily than adults. Somehow, as we grow, we become more and more spiritually nearsighted. So children can accept the marvelous, the wondrous, the magical, and the mystical in their lives and in their imaginations. And they can actually see a little bit of the glory of God that somehow over the decades we have lost the capacity to see. And we have to therefore become childlike in order to regain a little bit of that capacity to accept the marvels that the Lord lays before us, and to look at the world with the eyes of a child, even in the body of an adult. The world around us is marvelous, and what we see on this side of the veil is astonishing. And thanks to the growth in science and knowledge and reason, we can see to the very ends of the physical universe now. It's like 42 billion light years. We know of the billions of galaxies that exist. And we also know the world of the itsy-bitsy teeny-weeny, the subatomic particles. And we know now that what was taken for granted for centuries wasn't exactly real. We'd say, this is solid, this is real. Well, it's not as solid as we think. And the physicists, the scientists of today are talking more like the mystics of yesterday. Although most atheists seem to be caught up in 19th century materialism, which has such a simple view of the universe. What's on this side of the veil is so marvelous, so intriguing, so beautiful. The German theologians call it the Ur-Sacramentum. Got to say it in a foreign language, it sounds better. The original sacrament, the original sign that shows that God loves us, is this material world around us. And certainly in Ohio in the fall, as we see the grandeur of the glorious fall colors, we could allow our hearts to be childlike again and see that as part of the paintbrush of God, saying this is something marvelous. What's on this side of the veil is astonishing. And now the scientists are beginning to realize, there may be not only this one grand universe, but there may be billions of universes. Some of them parallel to ours, following different laws. They talk about dark matter and dark energy. They know there's something driving reality that they'll never be able to weigh or experiment with, but it's there. Some physicists, called string theoreticians, I don't understand it. I think they think like the whole universe is a big ball of string. I'm certain that's not it. But they speculate, to explain these 4 dimensions that we could see, there have to be at least 7 other dimensions. They're beginning to see there's something beyond the veil. And as religious people, we say, well, yeah, we knew that. We knew there's more to reality than meets the eye. And the great prophets taught us that. That great prophet Isaiah, who accepted his call, accepted his vocation, and became an instrument of God in the world to transform the human conscience and the human consciousness. All the lawgivers of Israel would teach us something extraordinary, that God exists, God created everything, and God has never forgotten us and expects us to lead godly lives, to take care of the weak, the widow, the orphan, the stranger in a strange land, and to give thanks to God with our whole hearts, minds, and souls. What a marvelous revelation that we've had there that shows us something beyond the veil. Now, as Christians, in the very person of Christ, something even more extraordinary happened. The Son of God became incarnate. The divine and the human came together in the person of Christ, who would be truly God and truly human. A marvelous mystery. And he came to reveal what's beyond the veil for us, and not only to do that, to make us capable of becoming holy, whole, powerful instruments in the plan of God. This is something marvelous indeed. But this is Vocation Sunday, where the people of God are called upon to pray for vocations. And everyone has one, some to the single life, some to married life, some have vocations to be widows and widowers. But there are also special vocations, special people like St. Paul, who was involved with murder, involved with crimes of violence, involved with bigotry and hatred to the core. And suddenly, he was called to be the apostle, the one sent. That's what an apostle means, to be sent. And Isaiah was sent by God after having been scorched by an angel with a coal from the very fire of God's throne. And St. Paul was blinded by the light of God on the road to Damascus. And his lifelong suffering would purge him of his sins and make him an instrument to announce the good news to the world. And so we see in the letter to the Philippians today a great gratitude. He said, I've had absolutely nothing. I've been destitute. On the other hand, I've had some good times too. And whether I was destitute or having some good times, I was always in the service of Christ and telling the story of Jesus to whomever would listen. And we need special people like that, deacons and priests, nuns and brothers, monks, contemplatives, to fight the battle for the human heart, mind, and imagination, to show that what's behind the veil is more important than anything we could ever imagine from looking at what's on this side of the veil. And there are many vocations within that call, some to the diocesan priesthood, some to teach, to preach, some to withdraw from the world in areas of total contemplation, like contemplative nuns or monks or hermits. Others to get into the battlefield of life, wherever it may be, like the Society of St. Paul or the Daughters of St. Paul, where we work in media, just to tell the story of Jesus to a world that needs to hear it more than ever. Now, when I was growing up in a steelworking, truck driving background, I remember as a little boy, about 7, 8 years old, I would say, my dad took me fishing with some of his buddies out at Lake Melton, and coming back, they stopped at the traditional watering hole, the 7 Mile Inn. And somehow they commented on today's gospel. Because they remembered the line, "Many are called, but few are chosen." I'm certain they didn't remember the whole parable. And they said, could the likes of us get to heaven? Could the likes of us, hard drinking, cursing steel workers, possibly go to heaven? Doesn't seem like we're called to that. And here I am with my root beer, and I says, no, Sister Mary Karen said everybody could go to heaven. And they'd say, oh, drink your root beer, Jeff. But we need that hope that comes from God, the God of greatness and the God of love, and the God who's with us every step of our journey. And that gives us hope, that gives us peace, and that ultimately gives us joy as we prepare ourselves as individuals and as a people to seeing what's beyond that veil.